This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to Carvana. Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Entertaining and informative
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right. Well, welcome to the what will be the July 20th edition of the Let the Record Show. We're taping here today on July 17th. I'm Eric Levine, and with me today is my good friend and co-host, Jesse Garcia, the chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee and the deputy chair of the New York State Republican Committee. Our anchor and fearless leader, Judge Richard Weinberg, is out sick today. We wish him a speedy recovery, and we look forward to having him back on the show next week. So we're going to start off today talking about, I guess, the topic most on everyone's mind here in New York City is the mayor's race, and which we currently have well-known communist and Jew hater Zoran Mamdani. And then we have a team of four others, former Governor Cuomo, Mayor Adams, Curtis Sliwa, and the other person whose name I always forget.
The voters.
And now everybody has to make their decision and figure out what they want to do. With us today to help make sense of some of this is Jim Thompson. Jim is the former director of the RNC Victory Fund, the political director of the state party, and is currently now a partner at a lobbying firm in D.C. and Albany. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Nice to talk to you today. And Chairman Garcia, always a pleasure to speak with you.
So I think one of the big developments in terms of the race, speaking a little more globally about the Democratic Party, is Ken Martin, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, recently declared that Mr. Mamdani and his team of folks and wing of the party are now part of the official tent and now officially part of the Democratic Party. As he has said it, we have conservative Democrats, although we can't name any. We have centrist Democrats, although we can't name any. We have labor progressives like me, and we have this new brand of Democrat, which is the leftist, which of course includes Mr. Mamdani and the acolytes of AOC and the Squad. Where do you see the party, the New York City Democratic Party, the New York State Democratic Party, and the National Democratic Party? Where do you see the state of that party as we currently see it?
Well, I think the data shows is that the Democratic Party is going through a crisis of identity right now. And, my grandmother was a Roosevelt Republican and turned into a Roosevelt Democrat and turned into a Kennedy Democrat. And it's very hard to find those folks because they became Reagan Republicans. And if you look at the voter segments and what happened in the presidential election with President Trump and Kamala Harris, President Trump outperformed Kamala Harris in every election district across the country comparative to the Biden 2020 race. And that's almost impossible to do. And you saw upticks in African-American voters for the president, Hispanic voters, Asian voters, and certainly Jewish voters, which you touched on. And some of the rhetoric coming from the left comes off as anti-Semitic and very hateful. And a lot of those voter segments that they've taken for granted over the past, couple of generations are starting to say, hey, you're not doing right by me with education in urban settings. You're not doing right by me with quality of life issues. And now they're trying to come up with all these platforms on how to talk to men and trying to swear more and be tougher. And it's not sincere in their approach. And I think that's why they're having such struggles on trying to navigate the Republican brand, who is not certainly popular across the nation and across voter segments. But you certainly see that they're struggling to message to working class voters across the country.
Well, one of the things I find particularly disturbing, though, is you have a guy who professes communism, who says that the state should control the means of production. As we know from Karl Marx and Das Kapital, that is the definition of communism. We have a guy who says that he wants to globalize the intifada. To everyone in the world who hears that term understands it means kill Jews wherever they are. What I can't seem to get my arms around is why Ken Martin would want to embrace that group and say they're part of our coalition, a part of the Democratic Big Tent. I mean, these represent some of the most dangerous and hateful ideologies of the 20th century. So we have a guy who's embracing Joseph Stalin economic policies, Mao's educational policies, and when it comes to the Jews, Hitler's social policies. And I just wonder if it had been any other ethnic group other than Jews, whether or not they'd all be embracing this guy and saying, let's make him part of the Big Tent. So it's kind of odd to me that rather I would have expected they'd say, we don't want you, get out, you're hateful. But instead they're just part of a big hug.
Well, and I would characterize it different. I don't think it's a big hug. I think it's for survival of their party, because they need most of the younger, affluent voters in their coalition subscribe to a lot of these beliefs. And if you saw the way the primary shook down in New York City with the voter segments breaking out that way, you looked at more traditional Democrats of African Americans and Hispanics voting for Andrew Cuomo, obviously not enough of them, and then you saw very affluent, gentrified areas of the city coming out in droves for the Democratic candidate. And again, if you have this kind of energy in the organization of the Working Families Party and the Democratic Socialist or what have you, whatever amalgamation they're using right now, the fact is they're very energized. You saw that across the primaries in upstate New York and Albany and Buffalo, the left of center candidates won. One was an open race in Albany, the state's capital, and in Buffalo, the second largest city, the incumbent mayor got beat by a candidate that was left of them. So you have a situation where in primaries, and this is how Bill de Blasio became mayor, you had somebody run to the left, and this guy makes Bill de Blasio look like a conservative.
Yeah.
The guy ran to the left, was not the most competent manager, and New York City needs an extremely competent manager, and he became mayor of New York City because of the multiple candidate primary in New York City.
Yeah, so really what you're saying is, so in the last century, 20th century, millions of people died. Americans, just people but around the globe, millions of people died fighting the Nazis and fighting communism, the Soviet Union. And yet, now, this is the ideology that you are saying is dominating the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party relies on people who believes that these ideologies that used to be considered evil are now mainstreamed, are being given a new life in the modern Democratic Party. And they're being embraced. And it seems to be either people who are supportive, who actually full-throated support of these dangerous ideologies, or cowards and morally bankrupt individuals like Chuck Schumer, who are incapable of speaking out against them. So is that really what the Democratic Party has turned into?
Well, the Democratic Party isn't asking me what they turned into, but for my opinion, and with Chuck Schumer, and in a couple of years, he probably could be facing a very tough primary opponent from that left side of his party. Make no mistake about it. I mean, you hear all the rumblings about AOC taking him on and things of that nature. And again, as a Republican operative and somebody that, does better in his lobbying career because Republicans get elected, if they want to get rid of Chuck Schumer as their leader, minority or majority, hopefully a minority, good. If AOC wants to take that job and take that mantle, and Bernie Sanders wants to be the leader of the party, Me and
He
Chairman
already
Garcia
is.
are going to be very, very happy men.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is certainly the intellectual leader of this party.
That's scary.
Anyway, Jesse.
Yeah. Jim, it's great to be with you. Eric, thank you for opening up the show. From my perch, though, I mean, I understand that Martin has opened up and said he's opened up the DNC. Honestly, from my perch and from the perch of unaffiliated voters and moderate voters, this is more of a complete surrender by the Democratic Party and a hostage takeover by the communist social Democrats that have now invaded the Democratic Party. Jim, I understand what you're saying about the energy that some of the working families people bring and the demographics, along with the Democratic Socialist groups that have now taken over the state party and really now the national party. I mean, think about it. Just earlier this week, they were falling on top of each other, having a breakfast for Monbami and endorsement after endorsement. He was being embraced by the national figures of the Democratic Party. So right now, what we always knew is that the Democrats stand. Mamdani is the face of this party, the new fresh face of this party, which is pro-criminal, pro-communist, pro-anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Jew, anti-cop, and anti-prosecutor. That's what they stand for right now. I mean, and honestly, I think you're going to see Chuck Schumer. And one of the reasons why we're going to see it's taking some time for Chuck Schumer to maybe have his meeting with Bombani for the endorsement to come out is because that meeting, I wish I could be there, because he's going to cut a deal to make sure he does not get a primary from the DSA, the Democratic Socialist Party members, when he comes up in 2028. But as we see this now to a political spectrum, and I feel horrible for my friends that live and work and have businesses in the city of New York if this keeps going forward. But Jim, I have two questions for you. You first as the political director, and I want to thank you because when I became chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee, you were one of the first people that I dealt with that helped me, understand the resources and the needs and the abilities of the New York State Party to assist us in rebuilding here in Suffolk County. But two questions. First and foremost, there is 5 candidates. Cuomo is already making a disaster of his campaign with, cheesy type of creepy commercials, and he's being attacked on all fronts for those commercials. He's staying into his race. And, of course, Adams now is outraising both Cuomo and Mamdani in this quarter.
Combined.
But what function, how can we get a Sliwa to get out of this race or a Cuomo to get out of it? How do we pare down this in reality, in real practical terms? How do we pare down this candidate pool so it's a one-on-one against either an Adams, either a Sliwa, or either a Cuomo?
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I'm not very optimistic that we're going to be able to get anybody out of the race. There's way too much bravado from the candidates, and I know President Trump and his very capable team were trying to talk to some folks about getting them to coalesce behind Eric Adams and whatnot, and I just don't see it happening. Andrew Cuomo had a shot in the Democratic primary. And his campaign, and you started hearing rumblings about 2.5 weeks out that things were starting to fall apart. And organizationally, they just weren't what they implied that they were. Because everybody thought that Andrew Cuomo, all the smart money in New York City, thought Andrew Cuomo was going to cruise. And obviously that did not take place. And the defeat was even bigger than what most people thought, 2 weeks out. So I think it's going to be a 5-way race with the 4 major candidates, and ballot construction is very important. Chairman Garcia, you remember when there was an independence party in the state of New York that was so vital to our candidates and stuff. And so now you have candidates that are going to be spending money on independent lines, not the independence party, but independent lines that are going to be able to get a message out. And we're talking about very small voter segments because you're talking about pluralities of an election because of the multiple candidacies instead of a one-on-one race where you need 50 plus 1. And again, that's how Bill de Blasio won the Democratic primary. And this is how somebody's going to win the general election in New York City. And this is not ranked choice voting in the general election like it is in the primary and special elections. So this is a much different animal. And I think Adams is going to continue to fundraise at a ferocious level. But the fact is, all the institutional Democrats, you pointed out, like the teachers union and organized labor and all those organization and money, are starting to get behind Mamdani. And that's a very dangerous prospect for the people that live in New York City and trying to do business there. Because, and Chairman Garcia, you got to be worried about this, because if the out-migration continues in New York City and the quality of life and the business climate continue to deteriorate, you're going to have more pressures on Nassau and Suffolk County and the Hudson Valley, Westchester, Orange, Rockland, Putnam, because you're going to have a lot of people going into the suburbs.
Well, that's assuming they stay in the state. I mean, part of the problem is a lot of the people are going to leave the state altogether.
That's a whole other issue. That's a whole other issue. You're absolutely right.
So once you do that, then that speaks statewide. When you have a statewide election, the people that would vote Republican or centrist Democrat, those people are gone. It becomes a death spiral.
We faced that in the Zeldin race 3.5 years ago, where a large preponderance of out-migration were moderate to conservative-leaning voters, whether it be Republican or unaffiliated, that left for other regions of the area. Now, you mentioned about how the state apparatus now is coalescing behind Mamdani right now, probably for their own self-preservation here. So he is the face of the Democratic Party. He is the face of the Democratic Party, and it's my understanding that just this week, Governor Hochul endorsed him. So now this is going to be interesting. We know that Republicans are outnumbered by about 8 million votes in registration, though unaffiliated voters are a large segment, a critical segment in any type of statewide election. Let's now take this state to the next level, into the 2026 gubernatorial race and the midterm elections. Let's stick with the gubernatorial race. Obviously, you got to think that Hochul's endorsement is to insulate herself from a primary from the DSA and the Democratic Socialists.
But she already has a primary coming.
Exactly.
I mean, her lieutenant governor already has basically announced that he's running for governor. Richie Torres put out a
backing of this energized group, or not having that backing of that energized group would play a role in the success of that primary.
She didn't have a choice. To your point, Chairman, she didn't have a choice, because an Irish Catholic from Buffalo that became governor because Andrew Cuomo fell under scandal. She beat Zeldin because, to your point, 1 million of our friends moved out of this state that voted our way. If we had the same voters that were in the Pataki election in 2002, Lee Zeldin would be governor and not the administrator of the EPA. But that's not the reality. And we all know so many people that live in the great states of Florida, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, because of this tax structure and the quality of life and the way they live in freedom in those situations, whether it's school choice or whether it's just quality of life and safety issues, and obviously tax policy is a big one. So this is a real problem in New York that the governor has to address. And I think you saw her in front of the congressional committee with Congresswoman Stefanik, Congressman Langworthy, and Congressman Lawler, really holding her feet to the fire about the quality of life in New York City, particularly the subway and the safety issues of all the illegal immigrants that were here and causing serious violent crime and not working with the officials at the federal level. And I don't know who was telling her to take part in those hearings or what have you, but that was not a great look. That could be used in a Democratic primary, and that certainly could be used in a general election, because it just did not seem like she was prepared for the onslaught that she was going to be facing. And two of those people mentioned were, could be potential challenges to her.
Well, what makes this worse in terms of the Hochul primary, remember, she's making these grand gestures. Oh, if you want to raise taxes, or if Mr. Mamdani wants to do X, Y, and Z, he has to go through me. Look, first of all, the woman has the spine of a wet noodle. But putting that aside, once she's primaried from the left, If you are right, and I believe you are, that all the vitality in the Democratic Party is in the radical left-wing, communist, Jew-hating wing of the party, and then Mr. Mamdani, if he's elected mayor, says to her, "You got to raise taxes," she won't be able to say no. If if he says to her, "You have to change MTA policy and allow the homeless people to live there," she won't be able to say no. So with all these people who are saying, well, if Mamdani's elected, it won't be so terrible because it requires the governor and the state legislature to pass some of these bills, in particular taxes, she's going to cave. He's going to get what he wants.
Yeah. I started in the New York State Legislature in 2003. The body of the Senate and the Assembly and the governorship has moved to the left dramatically. And I don't know if anybody's paying attention to what some of these legislative items are, and the climate goals and things like that. But it's right up Mamdani's alley, and he's a member of the legislature currently. He's got relationships there, and if he becomes the mayor of the most important city in America, he's going to leverage those relationships and leverage his cult of personality and the left-wing movement to get the things done that he wants to raise taxes on folks in New York City, to change the education policies, to reduce charter schools. That's very scary for a lot of folks in New York City that are trying to make ends meet and make a living while their quality of life deteriorates. I just think if you're an Asian American working really hard and trying to get a quality education, and you're getting bounced out of some of the merit-based charter schools and other institutions in New York City because diversity efforts, it's got to be very, very scary to be in that situation and, probably looking for greener pastures somewhere else. And that's a shame because New York City is the greatest city in the world. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm being told by Jim in the booth, Rich in the booth, who controls all things, that we have to take a break. So, Jim, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. We'd love to have you back. This has been a great conversation. And
it would be an honor.
That'd be great.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, and we'll be back for the next segment of Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
When you're separating from the military, no one tells you how hard it can be to get your civilian life up to speed. But with VA benefits, it doesn't have to be. From the VA home loan requiring no down payment, to the GI Bill covering tuition, books, and cost of living, to VA healthcare offering top-ranked, low-cost care designed specifically for veterans, all the support you need is at VA. I'm here telling every veteran because I wish someone had told me, get what you earned. Visit choose.va.gov.
Not all veterans are eligible for the type or amount of benefits mentioned here.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Enter the world of sports the way you want with EA Sports College Football 26. Whether you rise through the ranks as a coach or chase greatness from high school recruit to Heisman, build your legacy and wear your colors with pride. Buy College Football 26 now at go.ea.com/MVP-bundle and bring glory home today. EA Sports College Football 26 is rated E for everyone. Includes in-game purchases, including random items.
Your burger is served. And this is our finest Pepsi Zero Sugar. Its sweet profile perfectly balances the savory notes of your burger.
That is one perfect combination. Burgers deserve Pepsi.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Jesse Garcia, not only your co-host here, but vice chair of the New York State Republican Committee and proudly the chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee. With me is Eric Levine, a renowned lawyer, an essayist, who's our co-host. And let's throw a shout out and some prayers for a quick recovery to our co-host, Judge Weinberg, who is ill, but will be returning to us next week. That was a great segment that we had, Eric. And, we did a little bit of local politics. Now let's look at the global stage, and let's zero in on something that, you have been projecting over the last couple of weeks since it was announced or discussed, a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, which as of now has been completely, even though Israel has agreed to it, Hamas diddled with it, and there is no ceasefire. So why don't you give us an update on where we are on that stage as it is to the Israeli war with Hamas?
Yeah, so as I said last week, I didn't think that there would be a ceasefire because the typical is that the Israelis agree to something and then Hamas agrees to a framework and then keeps asking for more and more, and then ultimately, of course, they haven't agreed to anything. And the problem for Hamas right now is they don't have what they typically rely on, and that is an administration that forces the Israelis to stop, or a Europe or a UN that forces the Israelis to stop. Of course, the key player is the United States. Donald Trump understands that the only way to get Hamas to agree to anything is unrelenting pressure. And he's allowing the Israelis to do what they need to do. And their two goals, the two war goals, which they are going to achieve, is to get all the hostages back, dead or alive. We understand there are around 20 that are still alive. There are 50 still there, but around 20 alive. And the second goal is the destruction, annihilation, and evisceration of Hamas as a political entity and a military entity. Hamas will have no role going forward in Gaza, period, end of sentence. And it's not just the Israelis who want that. It's the Arab Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. They don't want it either. So because of course Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is a direct and clear and present danger to the Saudi regime and the Emirati regime. And so if you were to ask them as between who's the greatest threat to them, Iran or the Muslim Brotherhood, they would say the Muslim Brotherhood first. So they're rooting for the Israelis to win. So what's going to happen in Gaza? So we already see the Israelis arming some clans with a CLAN, families, some clans in southern Gaza. They've been arming them, and they've been fighting Hamas as well. So there's now a competitor for control, a non-Israeli Arab indigenous population competing with Hamas for control of Gaza. And I think you're going to see that expand. And the Israelis, who now control roughly 75% of Gaza, assuming there's no agreement with Hamas, and I don't think there will be, that they're going to now take control of close to 90% of Gaza. And what they may end up doing is there's some talk of moving the population in Gaza to certain areas inside of Gaza, so the civilians will be protected. They'll have to go through checks, security checks, to make sure that everybody who goes through there is indeed a civilian. And then at some point, after that population is moved, then the Israelis will say, if you haven't moved and you stay in these areas, we will assume that you are the military arm of Hamas. And then they will go about finishing the job, finishing Hamas. And at that point, I think you'll finally start to see things starting to wind up in Gaza. I think that's going to start relatively soon. I also think you're going to start to see a speed up between discussions between the Israelis and Saudi Arabia, and maybe even Kuwait, but some other countries to normalize relations with Israel. And so we'll have an expansion of the Abraham Accords. This is all what we want to achieve. We talked about Syria last week and whether or not they would enter the Abraham Accords. There have been a lot of developments in Syria over the past week. The Syrian government has been attacking the Druze, which is a minority population inside Syria, which there's a very substantial Druze population in Israel. So the Druze in Syria have family in Israel. So the Israelis have been protecting the Druze. And just as an aside, the Druze are Arabs. And the Israeli Druze are some of the most loyal Israelis in the country. They serve in the military, they vote, they own property, they have full rights. So this notion that Arabs don't participate or that Israel is an apartheid state, just another nail in the coffin of that lie. But in any event, so the Israelis have been protecting the Druze from the Syrian military. That does not augur well for the current Syrian government, that they're attacking some of the minority groups. So you also have there's also a Kurds inside of Syria. Now, there are some Kurds that are a member of the KKP, which is a terrorist organization. It's recognized as a terrorist organization by the United States. But there's a very substantial number of Kurds that are not part of that. And the Israelis are also making sure that some of these other Kurdish minorities inside Syria or Iraq are protected. But it doesn't speak well of the Syrian government that they are attacking their minorities, because they're not just attacking the Druze, they're also attacking Alawites. Alawites was the sect that Assad was originally from, so that's kind of a revenge kind of thing. But if the Syrian government is serious about governing the entire country and being accepted into the community of nations, it needs to stop killing their minorities. And the Israelis have also made clear that the Syrian military may not move south of Damascus. The Israelis are never going to allow again the mistakes that they'd made in the past, where they allowed the Iranians to develop nuclear weapons. They allowed the Iranians to arm Iraq. They allowed the Iranians to arm Syrians. And, of course, most importantly, they allowed the Iranians to arm Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israelis have changed these facts on the grounds. They're not going to make that mistake again. But the biggest advantage they have is that Barack Obama is no longer president and Joe Biden is no longer president, because they act as, under the JCPOA, they actually put the United States in the position of defending Iran and defending Iranian interests against Israel. So the Israelis are not going to allow this to repeat itself, where the Iranians or any of these other hostile powers are going to be able to entrench. And that gets to the most recent developments inside Iran. There seems to be some intelligence reports coming out that while the American attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities at Fordo were quite effective and set it back years, that at the facilities at Isfahan and Natanz may not have been as devastating as originally hoped, and that the Iranians may be looking to reconstitute. Well, they definitely will be looking to reconstitute the nuclear program. The question is how quickly and how overtly and how effectively they do that. But the Israelis are now talking about attacking Iran again. And, and you don't hear boo from President Trump. I'm sure he's still encouraging Iran to come to the table and to work out some sort of political arrangement. But the Iranians are never giving up the nuclear program. It is the essence of who the regime is. It basically exists on being anti-American, anti-Israel, and developing a nuclear weapon and being a hegemon of the Middle East. And without those four elements, it really requires regime change. So the Israelis are talking about attacking Iran again, their nuclear program again, and President Trump, as he does, is trying to use that threat of the attack as leverage to get the Iranians back to the table to negotiate an Iranian nuclear arrangement. It's not going to happen. They're never going to give it up. And I expect that we will see in relatively short order another Israeli attack on the Iranian nuclear program.
Yeah, I also understand, I just saw a report before we got on to the show, that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, while he's encouraged diplomacy, has said to Israel, do what you need to do and will not stand in their way if they're going to be taking any other substantive actions against Israel. But just to go back to the Hamas situation, I mean, anybody who has ever sides with these individuals and says that Israel has no right or should scale back its assault and its defense of its people, maybe they should listen to the stories of the hostages that were released as part of the ceasefire that never occurred. They spoke about sexual abuse, torture. These are individuals, men and women, children, that they've done this. Let's not forget that in the aftermath, in the hours of October 7th attack, the terrorist attack upon Israel and the Israeli people, the bodies of not soldiers being dragged, children, kids, and women specifically. This is part of the problem. And, these Hamas fighters and these terrorists, what they are cowards. Israel, unfortunately, and no one wants to see the loss of innocent life. No one wants to see war or death of civilians. But unfortunately, that is a consequence and byproduct of war and conflicts like this. And when you have cowards like the Hamas who use civilian sites, hospitals, schools, and so on, as their base of operations, to use civilians as their shields, they're the ones that are putting these people in harm's way. Just recently, in the last 3 weeks, it's probably the most bloodiest time for IDF soldiers. 18 have perished in the defense of their nation and the innocent people of Israel. Now we're seeing that they were chasing terrorists, and again, these Hamas terrorists are using the civilian population as shields. But one of the things I want to just touch base about is we've seen this. We've seen the Democrats. We've seen global leaders, some in the European Union, certainly the UN, no friends of the United States or Israel. They create these narratives that try to paint, a nation like Israel that's been assaulted and terrorized as the aggressor. But then I'm trying to get this name right. I know the acronym. The Network Contagion Research Institute, NCRI. They completed a 102-page report, which demonstrates clearly that the legacy media, the mainstream media, is part of the problem here. The media, like outlets like MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, Reuters, and others, have published unsubstantiated claims of attacks and issues against civilians by a group called the Gaza Health Ministry. Not only is this bias, but it's also laundering information in a warfare time. I say to you that I believe that part of the problem here, and I think that one of the benefits of having Trump and Netanyahu, and now NATO understanding on the Ukrainian-Russian front, that we are the liberty, freedom, democracy nations, our freedom nations like Israel, United States, and others. We are the good guys, and the good guys are here to defend themselves. We did not start this conflict. We did not start this war. It was brought upon the shores of Israel, and in different cases, it's been brought ashore against the shores in the United States and other countries. What do you think about that? About the attempted shaping of this narrative to try and pin Israel and maybe slow it down through public opinion, which thankfully it has not.
Well, there's nothing new here. I mean, the Palestinian strategy has always been to just say no, and just to gain more concessions in the hope that one day they'll say yes. The other strategy is when they go to war, as they did on October 7th, is that they've always depended on the American administration and the UN and the world to stop Israel short of their victory. They miscalculated this time, because had Kamala Harris won, then they would have been right. She absolutely would have stopped them, and they would have won.
Yeah, she would have.
But with President Trump, it's a whole new ballgame. They have miscalculated. So because they depend upon, they understand they're going to lose the war militarily, but what they rely on is the media to put out their pictures of dead babies and exploded hospitals and decimated schools and leveled mosques. So that, provided that the media does not make the point that yes, but the Hamas headquarters was in the school, the Hamas cache of weapons was in the mosque. The Hamas moves their military around in ambulances. That Hamas builds tunnels under UNRWA headquarters, the United Nations Relief Workers Association, that keeps Palestinians in camps as opposed to giving them a new life in another country. So they know that the media will put pictures of dead babies out there, and everyone's going to go, "Oh, horror, horror, the Israelis." But they don't also make the point that under international law, if you put military sites in a civilian position, you have made that is originally a civilian position into a legitimate military target. Israel is acting completely within international law when they attack a hospital that has Hamas headquarters in it, or when they blow up a school that has Hamas caches of weapons in it. Now, what the Israelis do is they warn the civilians that they're going to attack so that they can get out, but they ultimately attack. So what does the media do? First of all, they don't make the point because it just requires too much thought. But it's even worse than what you're describing. is they say, okay, Israel's actually, if we think about it, is actually acting within international law. So let's change international law. Or let's say international law applies to everybody except the Jews. For the Jews, for the Israelis, there's a different set of rules that no one on the planet could possibly comply with. If you try to apply the rules that Hamas and Israel's enemies at the UN or at CNN or MSNBC or any of these media outlets want to impose on Israel, we would all be speaking German today, because the Allies would never have been able to defeat Germany. We firebombed Dresden; everyone was fine. We marched from Normandy to Berlin. We killed civilians. We did what we had to do to win, and nobody was accusing anybody of war crimes, and nobody was accusing anybody of genocide or starving children. We did what we needed to do to win within international law. But now that the Jews are doing it, now we have to have a different international law. Look, when Jews die, most people, not all, most people say, "Oh, isn't that a shame? There's a dead Jew. Let's mourn. Let's wring our hands. This is so awful." But if the Jew fights back, that is a violation of everything we hold dear. That is a bridge way too far. Jews are not allowed to fight back. They can't defend themselves. They're white, oppressor, colonial, apartheid bastards, and Israel and Zionism is nothing more the personification of the strong Jew who's exploiting that poor person of color, Palestinian. They're not allowed to defend themselves, and we're going to stop them, and we're going to call them cruel if they stop them, and it's going to be okay by any means necessary to rise up and kill them, and we'll justify it. You understated, Jesse, what happened on October 7th. They beheaded babies. They put them in ovens and turned them on. They cooked babies alive. They cut open the bellies of pregnant women, picked up the fetus, and killed the fetus, killed the baby in front of the screaming mother. They kidnapped 80-year-old women and 85-year-old men. They kidnapped 6-month-old and 9-month-old and 2-year-old babies and then tortured them and killed them in captivity. This is who the world is trying to defend. This is who Zoran Mamdani supports. This is who he supports. When he's asked about October 7th, he blames the Israeli occupation. He blames Israel for October 7th. Let's look at that history of the occupation. If you want to just focus on Gaza, from 1948 to 1967, Israel was created in 1948. From 1948 to 1967, Egypt illegally occupied Gaza. Did anybody care about a Palestinian state? Did anybody talk about an occupation? Of course not. It wasn't until the Six-Day War in 1967, a war of self-defense by Israel, that they captured Gaza. Then all of a sudden, everybody cared about the Palestinians. But then in 2005, Ariel Sharon unilaterally withdrew all Jews, the entire IDF, every civilian. There wasn't a single Jew in Gaza from 2005 until October 7th, 2023, with a possible exception of an individual by the name of Gilad Shalit, who was a member of the IDF who Hamas went into Israel, kidnapped and brought back into Gaza, held him in captivity, and then the Israelis ultimately exchanged 1,000 Palestinian prisoners who had committed crimes. These aren't just people they rounded up and threw into jail. These are people who had committed violent crimes. And among them was Anwar Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, the mastermind of October 7th. He was exchanged as part of that for Gilad Shalit. But from 2005 until 2023, there were no Jews in Gaza. Spare me about this crap about occupation. There was no occupation. And let's also keep in mind, in 1948, under the UN partition plan, there were going to be two countries, one Jewish, one Arab. The Jews said yes, the Arabs said no, and the 5 Arab states attacked and tried to destroy Israel. In 2000, Bill Clinton had negotiated a deal between Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak, the Israeli prime minister. The Israelis, the Jews said yes, Arafat said no, and launched the Second Intifada. And Clinton, the exchange between Arafat and Clinton, very famous. Arafat says to President Clinton, "Mr. Clinton, you're a great man." And Clinton says, "No, I'm a failure, and you have made me one." In 2005, that's when the Israelis withdraw from Gaza. They give them a state. Here's a state. Here's your territory. Do whatever you want. They turn it into a terrorist hellhole. In 2008, George W. Bush negotiates an even better deal with Mahmoud Abbas, with Ehud Olmert, the then Israeli prime minister. Again, the Israelis said yes, the Jews said yes, and Abbas said no. And he said no because he wouldn't agree to end the struggle. He wouldn't agree to end the fight with Israel, and he wouldn't agree that the Palestinians should not be allowed, all the Palestinians should not be allowed this fictitious right of return. So spare me this notion that Israel is an occupying colonial power. Spare me this notion, as we know from the Druze and the other Arabs who live in Israel, who vote, who own property, who serve in the Knesset, who have actually been part of the government, serve in the military, that this is some sort of apartheid state. Spare me this nonsense that there's a genocide going on in Gaza. There were 700,000 people when Israel took control of Gaza in 1967. Today there are 2 million. How do you commit a genocide and go from 700,000 to 2 million people? It's absolute nonsense. I am again being told by the powers that be we have to take a break. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Get lost in the acoustic brilliance of 3D audio that surrounds you. Feel the embrace of the massage seats that adapt to your every move. Experience the warmth of a vehicle that welcomes you as you approach. We could tell you what makes a Lincoln SUV so extraordinary, but don't take our word for it. Take it on a test drive at the Lincoln Summer Invitation, with exclusive offers on now, only at your local Lincoln retailer.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Parents of twins, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to our final segment of today's show. This is Eric Levine here with my good friend, Chairman Jesse Garcia. We are missing terribly our anchor, Judge Richard Weinberg. We wish him a speedy recovery and hope he'll be back. We know he'll be back next week.
He will be back.
He will be back, bigger and better than ever. Anyway, so let's continue talking about international affairs. There have been some significant developments in Ukraine. President Trump seems to be shifting gears and changing direction, and at least in terms of his public views on President Putin. Jesse, what are your views, or what are your observations there?
What we've seen of this, and I know that we've had some debates about Trump is giving Putin too much rope during his first 7 months into his presidency. In this situation, maybe not enough for Zelensky. I think he's stuck between two individuals that he does not trust. But I do believe that, and I've seen in his actions that President Trump has tried to get a diplomatic solution to this, and that Putin has lied along the time. And it's come to a point where Trump has finally accepted that Putin has been lying to him. He's angry. He's being decisive as he has been in other areas of foreign affairs, like the attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities. And it all comes down to Trump had secured a 50-day ceasefire, which some people thought was not a good deal because it would allow, the softening up of Ukraine. Zelensky agreed to it, and Russia outwardly rejected it. So what did Trump finally do? He says, listen, if this is a global threat, we're going to get all of our partners involved here, NATO, the United States. So immediately he jump-started the transfer of military aid, weapons through NATO, getting NATO to purchase these weapons and then transferring with the understanding of transferring to Ukraine. Honestly, here, I think a little bit of, in all our lives, sometimes our wives who watch us do our jobs and husbands who watch their wives in positions of authority do their jobs sometimes have the clearest ability of clarity, where Melania Trump has, and then this is the president saying himself, pointed out how many times that following a phone call or a negotiation with Putin or between the two governments, that Russia has gone back on their word. And that has, demonstrated or at least brought forth a position that Putin cannot move forward. We're moving forward now, as I understand, with 50 days of a ceasefire, but it's probably coming even sooner than that. About 100% tariffs. Now, these are not just tariffs directly. These are secondary tariffs that are going to be on those countries that do business with or purchase Russian oil and other type of commodities. And that's where really the Russian economy can be shaken up, because some experts I've seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, have said that during the Biden administration, Putin has kind of insulated the Russian economy and his oligarchs from direct sanctions by boosting the ruble and so on and so forth. These secondary sanctions, they have more teeth. And that built into with the military action, the military transfer of aid, is something that's needed to prevent these continued assaults on civilian targets by Russia. Where do you think? Where do you stand on this? This latest development?
Well, I find them to be very, very, very positive developments. I've been an advocate for a strong, robust support of Ukraine since the inception of the war. I mean, I wanted to that. We have not been giving Ukraine this, in my opinion, we've not been giving Ukraine the support they've needed as quickly as they've needed it. Now, the Biden administration gave to President Trump a very raw hand. I mean, the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan convinced President Putin that he could attack Ukraine with impunity, and he was basically right. And then, of course, as he was massing his troops around Ukraine, Biden did nothing. And then as he was getting ready to attack, Biden said a minor incursion would be okay. And then he attacked, and then Biden was just so slow, always $1 short and a day late in terms of getting the munitions to Ukraine that they needed, and then putting constraints on their ability to use them. The big concern I had when Donald Trump became president was which wing of the Republican Party was going to really determine the direction of the Ukrainian policy.
Yes, you and Richard were very concerned about that.
And at the beginning, it looked like the Tucker Carlson isolationist wing of the party had the upper hand in Ukraine. But to President Trump's credit, he tried hard to make peace. We're all in favor of peace, but peace at any price is not is only good for in the very, very short term. I can end any war. I surrender. War's over. But you have to. It's not ending the war; it's how you end the war. And we do want peace. People are dying, and we don't want to see that. But we also don't want Russia to be able to take control of Ukraine, because as we've been saying all along, and I think the proof is in the pudding that this is the case, that if he takes Ukraine, then he's not going to stop there. And then eventually when he attacks a NATO country, now we're obligated to commit American troops. We don't want that. We want them stopped in Ukraine. And if Russians keep dying and Americans aren't involved, if Putin insists, well, that's an American victory. I mean, it just weakens Russia. So I'm delighted that the president is changing gears. He's finally, he's either woken up to who Putin is, or was aware of it and is now speaking publicly as to who Putin is. But regardless, he's heading in the right direction. And I'm also equally delighted to see that the Tucker Carlson wing of the party, whose foreign policy is really no different than Zoran Mamdani's and AOC's wing of the party, bring everybody home with surrender, but maybe for different reasons, but it's really the same result, that wing of the party is being marginalized. It's being pushed further and further to the fringe. That is an extraordinarily positive development, not just for the Republican Party, but for the United States. And to your point, Jesse, it was 100% right. These secondary sanctions will really have a bite, because that's how you really damage the Russian economy. If they can't sell their oil or their natural gas around the world, their economy is just going to dry up. I mean, as John McCain once said, Russia is a gas station with a country. I mean, that's really all they are. And if they can't sell their energy products, they have no income. And then the one group of people that Putin is really afraid of are the oligarchs in Russia, because those are the people that can push him out if they get really pissed off enough. And these secondary sanctions really will bite them hardest in their pocketbooks. So that is not just a direct attack on Russia, threat to Russia. That's a direct threat to Putin.
Yes, because those secondary sanctions will hit truly the puppet masters that are keeping Putin in power, the oligarchs, the financial backing, the people who are really those Russian oligarchs that are, glomming all the money for their own purposes in different accounts throughout the country, throughout the world, so that they can stay rich and their economy suffers. Those secondary sanctions kills that.
No, absolutely. I mean, and also Russia's also had some very bad luck in the Middle East. I mean, their closest allies there, Syria and Iran. First of all, Assad's gone; he's completely gone.
Yes, mm-hmm.
And now they have a very anti-Assad regime. It's a pro-Turkey regime. That one of the points we didn't make earlier, but we will make now, is the country that benefited most from Assad falling was Turkey, because the guys there now, Jelani is the Turkish creation. He's I don't know if he's necessarily a puppet, but he's certainly under their control. But anyway, Russia is out of Syria. Their military bases and access to bases in the Mediterranean is significantly compromised. Their other ally, Iran, is very badly wounded, so they're weakened there. And they did nothing to help Iran, so on the world stage they're completely humiliated. It's been a very bad turn of events for Russia ever since October 7th and ever since President Trump became president. I am getting the final word from Richard in the booth, who controls all and knows all, that we are out of time. Jesse, thank you for a great conversation today, and thank you, Eric. And thank you all for listening. We look forward to seeing you next week with our anchor, Judge Richard Weinberg. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Let the Record Show. You can hear Let the Record Show Sunday mornings at 6. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350-plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.